Stranger Things Season 3 has been uploaded to Netflix around 3 a.m. last night, my time, and so I was able to watch a few episodes before bed because I'm a massive night owl. And then I watched the rest of it today because I'm still sick, which gave me the perfect excuse to do nothing but watch Stranger Things. So that was really fun, and I'm not sad about the fact that I didn't do anything today. In this season, much to Hopper's dismay, Eleven and Mike are dating now and learning things about each other because it's right about that age for both of them. Joyce is mourning a loss from the previous season and trying to pick up the pieces. Dustin has returned from camp proclaiming that he has a new girlfriend and nobody believes him. Nancy and Jonathan are both trying to hold down jobs in a terrible environment. Steve and a new friend named Robin are working at an ice cream parlor at the new Starcourt Mall. And Will begins to sense that the Upside Down and the entities that live there may not quite be done with them as Billy encounters something pretty terrifying. I've liked both seasons of Stranger Things so far. While the second one definitely started out slower than the first, it picked up steam, and 3 does the exact same thing. The first few episodes are fine, mostly because I like those characters. And that's when a great TV show has some leeway. When the show isn't doing quite as well, you at least love the characters and you want to see what they're doing. The storytelling for the first few episodes felt very much like setup. There were some funny jokes, they were well directed and well acted, but it didn't really feel like anything was happening. A plot involving evil Russians is introduced and it felt a bit cheesy, but that's kind of the charm of Stranger Things. Quite a bit of the show embraces the cheesiness, in particular of the 80s, and finds ways to show versions of that today. And this season does that exact same thing. There's a character that is obviously a riff on the Terminator. There's mini sequences inside a movie theater where people are watching Day of the Dead or Back to the Future. And obviously the styles, the clothing, the music choices, all of it is meant to feel very nostalgic. But again, I don't think this show relies entirely on that because the acting is just far too good, the characters are far too well rounded, and the show is extremely well directed. If this relied entirely on nostalgia, it wouldn't have made it past season 1. Because yes, it has all of that, but it also has really great storytelling, and after the first few episodes, I would say around episode 4, this season got goddamn awesome. I do have some gripes with it though, and we'll talk about that more towards the end of the video. Right off the bat, one of the greatest things about this show is the production design. This show is beautiful, especially this mall. They spent a lot of money to make this look like a 1980s mall. And my God, I mean, you really have to hand it to the people working behind the scenes, crafting all of this, making this look and feel like a 1980s show. Across the board, all performances are excellent. All the kids are great. Winona Ryder, David Harbour. Millie Bobby Brown, once again, is one of the best young talents working today, and she proves that throughout this entire season. But Dacre Montgomery as Billy in particular got a lot more to do this season, and this is when we're going to get into some spoilers. I want to warn you ahead of time. I enjoyed this season. If you haven't seen all of it yet, I had a good time with it. Go watch the rest of it. But if you have, we're going to get into spoilers now. So that's your warning. Dacre Montgomery had a lot more to do, and that's because he gets taken over in a way, and he becomes sort of a vessel for this thing that's getting larger inside this factory. Rats around town are eating fertilizer, people are eating fertilizer, and then they're blowing up, or they're turning into goo, and this thing is sucking them up and just getting larger and becoming this gigantic force. But throughout the season, Billy is overtaken by this thing, and he makes choices that surprise all of his friends, in particular his sister Max, who has no clue what's going on, and so they got to play a lot with relationships in this season, both familial and romantic. They did a lot of good work there, especially with Hopper and Joyce. There's some really sweet stuff there. They do a lot of arguing, and it's kind of cute. And obviously with Eleven and Mike. This season does a pretty good job of showing the ups and downs of young romance, how one day it can be really great, and the next day you have no idea what's happening, and everyone hates each other. And it was entertaining, played well enough for comedy, but they also took it to a serious level, and I appreciated the fact that they were able to go there without making it feel too cheesy. Speaking of cheesy, this show really heavily embraces the hilarity of an evil Russian organization underground in a mall, and Dustin and Steve and Robin intercepting this signal and then having to decode it and figure out where it's coming from. And that felt pure 80s to me. Some people today are going to look at that and be like, that's dumb. And it is, but I feel like it's lovingly embracing the fact that for a very long time, Russians were like the villain in every movie. And it's basically recycling that, which this show does, and it has received criticism for. But I will say this again, if this show was only recycling, if it was only nostalgia, it would not be as successful as it is, because we've seen tons of shows and movies try to do that. And they don't go anywhere because you didn't give a shit about the characters. This show has characters that people love, which is why it's so successful. Just like how they got Sean Astin for the last season, this season has Carrie Elways, another actor very famous for the 80s, in particular The Princess Bride. And I liked seeing him as this evil, corrupt mayor. And there's some great confrontations between him and Hopper, which reminds me, Hopper is basically pissed off throughout this entire season. From episode 1, he is at this heightened level of anger, and I love that. I love that he never really got a chance to calm down. Every obstacle they gave that character pushed him, kind of shoved him beyond his comfort zone to make him feel constantly uncomfortable. The choices they made with the characters throughout this season really worked for me, and honestly, I thought it was pretty intense after episode 4. 4 in particular was great. The finale of that episode was really nail-biting, as was the last 2 episodes. Really, really good stuff. Everything after 4 was really solid and really entertaining. Very fast-paced. But let's talk about how they choose to wrap things up. I like the idea of Dustin's girlfriend actually existing, although I kind of predicted that. I figured from episode 1, when everybody was doubting him, that you wouldn't see her for the whole show, and then you'd find out she's real and everyone's surprised, and that happened. But I'm glad it happened. I also loved what they did with Steve and Robin. The friendship that's shown there I thought was really adorable and well developed, and them being on drugs from the Russians was hilarious. And I have to talk about Friar Ferguson as Erica Sinclair, because she was hilarious throughout this whole show. They gave her so much to do, and that is a bit of a risk because this is a young character that doesn't have a lot of development throughout the previous seasons, not a ton, and she's sort of being thrown into this world, and I thought Friar Ferguson was magnificent. She really ate it up. Her sarcasm and how blunt she was about everything, I thought provided some of the best humor in the entire season. I was also surprised at what they were able to do with the character Alexei, because he's kind of defecting. His comrades view him as a traitor, and his development and then his eventual tragic fate was actually kind of heartbreaking, surprisingly. They did a great job of taking characters that you thought were established in a certain way and just subverting your expectations from that. It's just like how Steve Harrington is one of my favorites now, but in the first season he kind of sucked. By season 2 he was amazing, and he's even better now. So they're doing a really good job of introducing characters, making you think this is how it's going to go, and then showing you, actually, no, we have a better idea. But in the last few episodes, as the Mind Flayer is destroying the mall, and 11 is trying to use her powers, but they're not really working out, and you see all these characters coming together to try to defeat this thing, and eventually Hopper giving his life was surprising. And it was weird because throughout the whole season, I was thinking one of my issues with it was that I was like, nobody's going to die. They're not going to risk that. They're not going to take any risks. These are all kids. It's not going to happen. And then they kill off Hopper. And that letter that he wrote for 11 was extremely sad. I did not expect it to affect me in the way that it did, which reminded me how much I actually kind of gave a shit about these characters. Still, the end credit scene has this Russian base, and these guys take somebody and kind of feed him to something. You're not exactly sure what's happening, but before that happens, they say, no, not the American. So you're to assume there is an American in one of these prison cells, which is probably Hopper. I don't know who else it would be. I mean, you could tell by the way they cut together his quote-unquote death scene, because they never show him vaporize. There were like these 4 or 5 random scientists that were there, and they just vaporize. But they don't show what happens to Hopper. They don't show you for a reason. He's probably coming back. He's way too much of a fan favorite, and I'd be really surprised if they never did anything else with him. But I was satisfied with the entire last half of this season and aspects of the first few episodes. I mean, there was no episode that I outright hated. There was certainly nothing as bad as the storyline from the Lost Sister episode in the last season, which they have completely ditched, it seems. I do not blame them. That was such a misstep. And obviously they were like, okay, no one likes it. We're moving on. But out there somewhere are Eleven's buddies, I guess. As far as issues, besides some things I've already talked about, I didn't really think the Karen Wheeler having a weird crush on Billy and wanting to cheat on her husband thing really went anywhere. It didn't go anywhere. But a lot of time was given to that. And it just felt completely unnecessary plot-wise. Because I get that it's supposed to show Billy is changing. Because he starts out and everybody loves him and all the girls are looking at him and everything. And then he's just really weird. And now something's wrong. But it didn't really have anything to do with Karen Wheeler. It never really came into play for her that much, and so it just felt unnecessary. And there are some extreme similarities to the general flow of this season in regards to the last. Will is sensing that something is happening and maybe something is going to come back, except this time he's getting like goosebumps and tingles on the back of his neck, and so that's kind of the sign this time around, and people are not entirely sure if he's telling the truth. Joyce has a new crush, Hopper. Hopper dies. In the last season, Sean Astin died, and so it's kind of going in like a similar route and feel, which I can completely understand those criticisms. But it never really bothered me. There's a part of this season where you can definitely feel like it's a little bit more of the same, and I totally understand if you feel that way. But if you already liked that, it's just going to be more of what you liked. I do wish that there was a little more originality to each season, because sometimes it can feel like a lot of the same shit is happening over and over again, and this tiny town is just having to continuously fight back against this thing, and it keeps coming back, and something keeps coming back. And it's a little hard with this storyline to set up a continuous narrative. Gratefully, the show is boosted by so many great characters and performances and really amazing direction, and they're doing great stuff with where they put all of these characters. And this show was really fast moving. I never felt bored, even once. So that's impressive. All in all, I really liked this season. I think I liked it a bit more than the last one. It's a little bit hard to tell sometimes when you binge watch. You can breathe a little bit more and think and ponder about a show when you can only watch like one episode a week. When you watch the whole thing in like a day or two, you can't really feel the nuances to it. And so I'm excited to look back on this show in the future and really look at each season and figure out where the strengths and the lows are. I'm going to give Stranger Things Season 3 an A-. Yet again, another good season of Stranger Things. A few minor issues with the first few episodes, but the characters really just make the whole thing enjoyable. It's one of those shows that has gotten to that level for me where even when an episode isn't the greatest, the fact that I enjoy watching these people go through these adventures just makes it all worthwhile. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.